Hello to my fellow compositors and VFX industry fans or fellow colleagues. um, I, like a lot of you, have had a lot of free time lately, and I was inspired by the VFX Talk Keying video, so I wanted to put out a video on how to approach this shot, and my thoughts on it, and a little bit about my workflow, and a little bit about my history, just to I don't know, as a gift or as something to contribute towards the field. Um, I have worked on this shot for a few hours now, and I think it's in a pretty good place. I think it's pretty solid output slash workflow, so I wanted to present it and see where it would take us. Alright, so let's crack on. So the footage comes from Action VFX. It's a MOV file. I think most people know you shouldn't be working on MOV files, you work on image sequences. So this little area right here is me just taking the MOV file, I retime it to start at 1001, I clip the header and the footer on it, like the leading frame that says Action VFX. Since I'm working in Nuke non-commercial, HD 1080 is about as crazy as it's going to be able to let you get. So this is 1920 by 1013 because of that, pretty much. So I went ahead and changed the format down and rendered out the image sequence. That's pretty standard. I think most people would do that. So at this point, it's kind of like if you were a compositor at a medium-sized studio, they would give you this green screen footage, they would give you a background, and they would say, hey, get comping. If you're at a bigger studio, they would give you possibly some paint work, possibly a camera, the denoise would possibly be done for you, and you might even get a garbage mat for the hair or for the character or both. We didn't have any of that, but I ended up building a majority of it. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty much part of the job at this point. I think most people that have been comping for a little while would be able to handle most of that. So let's say you were to get this, what's the first thing that I would do? I would throw down a high pass, which would show some of the high frequency detail, and I would track this little dot right here. And the reason being that whatever background we have would want to be moving with the footage. Thankfully, this footage doesn't really move that much, but you can definitely see that there is some movement there. So I went ahead and tracked it, and whenever she moves in the way, just went ahead and used a different dot. Feel like that would probably suffice for this kind of a track, depending on how crazy they got, but yeah. Anyway, I went ahead and did the edit generate, generated kind of a spline for this, and that's kind of the match move. I don't really use it that much, but I do use it for the background to have it move in the same way. Just kind of a little trick on all that. So don't be fooled just because it doesn't look like it's moving. Sometimes it is moving and you just can't see it. Alright, so the next part. So this is a denoise. It's like a cheapo depot denoise because I don't have reduced noise. So I am using the denoise that's just out of the box nuke. Little trick I like to do is I like to put it in log space, gamma everything up, run the vector generator, throw the denoise in, try to find a part that's kind of like, I don't know, average, and yeah, just reverse it all back out when you're done. You know that there's the reverse right here to reverse it. Same thing with the color space, you can just swap and put an output. And yeah, I think it does a pretty decent job. It could be way better. Obviously reduced noise would do a better job, but you know, I think for our purposes for this demo, I think it's pretty good. I think it puts out a pretty decent output, and yeah, I'll leave that alone. Leave it at that. Alright, the next part. And this is kind of the part where I'm going to try to move it to a frame that's similar to the one that was in the other video. We know that there's a fringe issue on this footage. It was apparent in the other video, you can see it's kind of right here in the red channel that the high frequency detail has some issues getting negative values, and kind of have to fix it, or else it's going to be really, it's going to make keying a big problem. Let's put it that way. So since it's in the high frequency details, what we can do is we can median away the detail and then divide it from itself to isolate the detail that is probably causing us issues. Green and blue channel, generally fine. Red channel, probably needs some work. So the way I approached fixing this is I shuffled it into its own channel, pulled a key, and then graded the key, and then I used that as a driver to kind of lift everything that's in there up by quite a bit. And then I did that again, just to fix that little issue right there. I kind of went a little bit more aggressive on this by softening it and desaturating it, and then multiplying it against itself here to rebuild like a version of it that in my opinion would be a little bit less crazy. But the thing is, we're starting to lose detail. So how I would fix that is, we know it's only in the red channel, so we copy in the new red channel and then we max in all the old values from the old red channel. And now we kind of have something that's close, but not 100% the same. We could try to do more to try to fix it, but honestly, I feel like it's pretty close, and it will make it a lot easier to key. So I'm going to leave it at that, honestly. I feel like that's pretty much a solution for this for now. At the end of the script, if you were in tech check and they were making a big deal out of it, you could probably divide, multiply it back in. I'm not going to do that, but just know that that is a solution for all of this. So that's kind of something to keep in mind. Alright, so the next system I built out is cleaning up the box here. If you were at a bigger studio, they probably would give you a plate where it was already painted out. But honestly, this kind of works pretty simple, especially on this shot. You just take a frame of the first shot, the last shot, you max them over, you paint out what's missing, then you put it under where the box would be. It's pretty standard. It tracks through the rest of the footage. Honestly, all I had to do was track the box, which was fairly seamless, and then just do a little bit of roto on it, clean it up, and you're on your way. So now we're going to get to the bulk of this shot. This is kind of what I guess everybody wants to know, is like the key, the despill, and the soft gears for it. So I'm a big proponent of screen clean just because it makes everything simple for me. I'm also a big proponent of making everything be on the B pipe, labeling all my systems, putting dots at the end of all my ideas so that if I need to I can call them later. If I had stamps I would use stamps, but it's Nuke non-commercial so I can't. But yeah, this just comes from like old programming, add a semicolon at the end of your line, add a dot at the end of your thought kind of thing. It's just easier to make things organized that way. That's just how I prefer to do it. I'm sure there are a million other ways, but honestly, I feel like this has always worked for me. Also makes it easier to build out your systems this way in case you need to copy them into other areas. Alright, so we'll move on. So the screen clean. Basically for me, when I composite, I try to go from big to small with my solutions. And then if I have exceptions, I like to use the key mix node with a roto whenever I need to do something that's like an exception to a rule. But I try to work holistically where I'm solving big problems, and then I just knock down as many big problems as I can until I get to smaller problems. So this is a big problem. I don't think this key or this green screen is especially difficult to key, but there will be situations eventually where it will be difficult and you will need a screen clean. For instance, if there's a screen with like half of it being one dark green and one light green, or one's blue and one's green, or you can think of a million different reasons. Sometimes there will be shots where the background is nighttime or really bright daytime or has trees or whatever. You want to try to remove as many issues as possible. So most people know about IBK stacking. I stack IBKs too, but I only really do three. One that's small, one that's medium, and then one that's large to fill in the rest. This blur is to remove anything that didn't grab, because again, we're thinking about things from high frequency, medium frequency, and low frequency. Frequency-wise, we really only care about evening out all the big blurred dark areas. So by dividing that from itself and multiplying something that's more flat, we have a much more even and clean green screen to key from, which makes our job and life a whole lot easier. This is just here to remove the bottom. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Next part is the keys. The keys, pretty much, a key is just a map. Like, building out your own mats to specify different areas is kind of part of the job of compositing. Using those mats to control the functions or the effects that you're trying to create, or to try to reach a specific aesthetic. That's all kind of part of the job, and I'm sure most of you out there already know about that. Something I want to point out is just if you do this, and you just key like this, you may not, this color may not be the color that you want, just because you might want something a little bit edgier or rougher, or you might want to clip more values, like you might want to push down more. As you can see, this isn't perfect. Just something to keep in mind to test the values inside of here, especially in here, to see if it's something that you might like better. This is the green I ended up on. Again, everyone's going to have their own way of working. That just kind of works for me. So with this one, I'm just hitting like an average of everything. This one, a little bit harder, but trying to just capture as much detail as I can. You can see it fills in a little bit there. Same thing with this last one here. Again, all these different methodologies, just trying to put together a map that will work. This final grade here, if you can push everything up, you can see that there are still little areas here that aren't perfect. If we gamma slam down, it's a lot more full. Ends up working a little bit better, so just keep that in mind. The rest of this is like me cleaning up anything that might be left over. So I think in the other video they showed you about like eroding up and then eroding down. I think that's a good technique, but I like to use this technique better. So the median is good at just removing any 1 pixel or 2 pixel strays. It's also inside of here. The grade is just, you know, grading everything to just really crunch it up, erode up, blur it, and then just, it's kind of like a garbage mask for your mat. So it's just kind of like a big ugly mat to mat out anything that's coming out of here. As you can see now, pretty clean. A little bit going on down here, but honestly, like, it's easy to fix. You could just isolate it with like a, this is where I would make an exception and make a roto and grade it and fix that, but that's just something to keep in mind. And then I softened it just because I felt like it was a little bit harsh. Just a tiny bit. These little things here are just kind of things that, especially looking at it here, I've taken a long time, worked on this shot for, like I said, for like a few hours, kind of knew what I wanted to get to as far as like the harshness on this mat, like how edgy it would be. Alright, so once we hit this endpoint here, I feel like this mat is pretty good for what we're trying to achieve. Solid mat, green screen what we need. Now we gotta get to the D-spell. Normally I like to make my D-spells pretty simple. Unfortunately, because of the fringing on this shot, the lighting on this shot, on the background, I've had to do a couple things that I would consider to be less kosher, a little bit more destructive, but I end up solving most of those issues down the line anyway, and it does look good at the end, so it works. Normally I would try to be a little bit more soft with my key lights and a little bit less destructive, but this is kind of the exception for this shot. Each shot you kind of have to approach in its own specific way. Alright, so what is despilling? Despilling is just color correction, where you're trying to color correct out any green spill lighting that is spilling from the green screen onto the talent, or whatever would be the talent, I guess, in the shot. Usually there's lots of ways to do it. Hue correct or different despills have like their own little things that let you move everything around. One that I really like, but that can be a little strong, is despill the color, because it's very fast. So you're like, I want this to be green, I want this to be the color. But generally, for this kind of work, I use the key light, just because it's just out of the box the simplest. If you look at her fingers, right here, you can see that there's still some green. Same thing here, but if you min the two together, you kind of start to get to a place where most of that green is gone. Unfortunately, you can see that there's still a fair amount of fringing happening. So we're going to have to do something that's kind of destructive and then rebuild from there to get to where we need to get to. So we're going to, from this despill from the original, we're going to get a whole bunch of green. This is the difference in chrominance and luminance between this and this. That's going to end up being useful a little bit later down the line, so keep that in mind. We also want to take the key that we just made, and we're going to take that, we're going to gamma it down, and we're going to eat into it a tiny bit. We're going to have to do this, unfortunately, and we'll fix what the problems it creates later. But this is just a mask in here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the key that comes from the despill, we're going to grade it down real harsh, we're going to clamp it, and we're going to blur it and unpremult it. Then we're going to merge this over this, and now we have all of the color values and luminance values from around here are spilled into the edges of this, which will end up being really useful. We're going to take the missing values from here, desat it, and then we have to gain down because this green screen is too bright. We're going to plus it back over on top. Now you're going to say we're still missing a few values, and we're going to get to that when we get here. Next thing is we're going to take care of the hair. The hair in and of itself is fine. Literally just do kind of a soft despill. This will also take care of this little spill that's happening on her face. And key mix it in. It's literally that simple. Most of the time hair will be its own thing, its own pipe. Especially long flowing hair, especially blonde green on hair on green. It's generally just, that's just how it is, man. Just gonna have to isolate it and fix it, merge it over. Alright, having done all this, some of the more intrepid folks out there will say, hey, when you cut this out, you're gonna be missing the luminance values on the edges. Correct. So we want to do a luminance restore on the entire thing. So you can do that by going from linear to HSV, and same thing with this side, which is the green screen version of it. You don't have to worry about the green because we're only dealing with luminance, not chrominance. And we can blend some of it back in, the blue to blue, because they're both in HSV, and merge it back out. And now, this should be a solid D-spill. So the next thing I like to do is I like to blend my D-spill into the background I'm using. You probably don't have to do this, but I like to anyway. It just ends up making a better D-spill at the end of the day. It's kind of like a bonus. So I'm going to take this D-spill, I'm going to take the original green screen, and we're going to find the luminance difference between the two. We're going to desaturate it, and we're going to grade it to make a matte, an inverse matte. I'm going to blur the edges because I felt like it was a little too sharp from all the stuff we're doing over here. And I'll multiply it against the background. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the key we built and stencil out what's remaining. And then I'm going to use the key we built back there. I'm going to use this D-spill that we built. I'm going to put it under here, which is stenciled out from here. So now her new edges are integrated into the background's edges. So we should have a fairly, really strong, unpre-multed version of the green screen into the character. Then we're going to take that, shuffle in the new alpha, and pre-mult it. And this is our hard key for everything. The next step we want to do, if you were going to bring the fringe back, would be to merge it into here before the pre-mult. I personally don't think it's that big of a deal, but this is where it would go. Alright, the last step, the keyers. So we have the background, we have the match move that I mentioned earlier in the video, and yeah, just kind of start to do the soft keys. So what's the objective of the soft keyers? So the objective here is to grab anything that's soft, that's anything that's kind of like micro details or high frequency details that wouldn't have been captured in this. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I will try all of them and see which ones stick, because it makes my life easier. Let's put it that way. So one of the things I like to do is just change the green screen to white, and then multiply that over the background. That'll get us a lot of mids and lows from the background, from the green screen into the background. Because the green screen is flattened and balanced, we don't have to worry about introducing extra stuff into it. This is the additive keyer by Tony Lyons. Only difference I did was I added a little gamma to it. Again, just to do the exact same thing, except for the highs, which is merging the highs over. Not a big problem there. To clean plate, to the normal version of normalized keyer, green screen. So now we have lows, mids, and highs. But I like to get a little cheeky and see if the soft keyer can get a little bit more out of this. Yes, it can. I will gamma this down to try to get it to a similar place as the background, and then I'll just max it over. And as you can see, it does tend to grab a few more things that might be missing. You might be scared about these black lines here. Don't be, because literally a majority of this stuff is going to only be in the hair section, so I'm not going to end up worrying about all that. Last soft keyer, I like to pre-mult it out by grading down everything, softening it, and then pre-multing it, and then just kind of overing it really softly, seeing if we're going to grab anything that's missing. You can see it kind of alleviates the issue that's happening here, kind of catches all of the wispy hair detail or the flyaway hair detail. So that will work. And the last thing I like to do is I like to restore anything that's coming from the background, like this plate footage here. Just cut it out. Or if it's a bigger deal, I would go in and do individual rotos for pieces of hair. And then I merge the hard key over the soft key. Shouldn't be an issue. And then I just compare it to the plate. Should be in a really good place. You can see we are, for the most part. Far from perfect, but this key, pretty good. I feel like it's in a good place. Are there things that I would probably play around with more? Yeah, absolutely. Like, see a little crazy bright stuff happening here, or... But for the most part, I feel like this kind of works. I feel like it works, especially for first looks, and maybe up to last looks. Tech check, we'd have to do a few things, obviously. This is an issue. Have to make sure that we're grabbing all the small details, like what's happening, what's going on right here, what's going on right there, maybe the shoelaces, right there. Oh, they're not too bad. But for the most part, yeah, I feel like that's kind of how I would approach this issue. Big to small, B-pipe being the major intersection on things, desfill here, keys here, additive or soft keys to the right, plate over here, and yeah, that would basically be it. Obviously we'd have to suit the taste, we'd have to grain, we'd have to grab mats for DI or other things, but yeah, just kind of wanted to throw this out there. Maybe it would help somebody, I don't know. Yeah, thanks everybody. Have a great night.